Well, hi there. My name is Jason Stapleton, and thanks for checking out this training. What you are about to watch is the first section, the first training in a 3-day event that I held earlier this year called the Influential Communication and Branding Workshop. And my goal in this first training is to teach you a little bit about why influence works. Why does liking work? Why does reciprocity work? Why does scarcity work? And we all hear these words when they talk about it. Oh, you need to put scarcity into what you do. Oh, you need to incentivize them. You need to get them excited about it. You need to have a good hook. But nobody really takes the time to explain why. And I think big reasons a lot of people don't know. And so we're going to have a little fun in this training, and I'm going to take you through and show you some stuff and show you some videos and really try and help you understand why we do the things we do. What causes people to take action? What moves them to closer to in the buying experience? What builds trust and likability? And I really hope you enjoy it. If you do, would you mind just leaving a little comment underneath and telling me what part you liked the most? And also don't forget to like and subscribe if you feel like it was worth it. I'd love to have you as a regular listener and viewer of the channel. And with that said, here you go. And what we're going to talk about tonight, I really think is the most interesting thing that we can talk about as it relates to marketing, branding, and influence. And we're going to be, which is specifically the behavioral science of it. And I know that that sounds a little bit crazy and a little bit weird, especially if you don't geek out on this stuff. But what I'm hoping is by the end of this, you're going to be as big a geek about this as I am. And even if you're not, at least you'll have a newfound understanding and respect for actually what goes on when we make decisions and why we buy and what influences us to make different decisions. And this is going to help you if you have a business, if you sell or market anything online, if you work for a company and you're in charge of their marketing or their brand management. This is going to be extremely valuable for you. But it's also going to be valuable to you if you're, say somebody who works in the political sphere. Let's say you're somebody who's trying to impress upon your friends, neighbors, relatives, the value of your ideas. This is going to be just as applicable to you all as it is to those of you who have a monetary reason for learning how to do this. And to define more specifically, I think if we're just going to just start off the first, I thought I would give you a definition of what influence is, because we're talking about influential communication. To me, influence is the ability to modify or control someone's thoughts, beliefs, or actions. That's really what we're doing here, is we're trying to control someone's reality. And I'm going to get back to that in just a minute. But I always have issues. People will always bring it up, and they'll want to talk about the morality of what we're doing, the ethics involved with manipulation. Or influence. I mean, really, manipulation or influence are often used interchangeably. And to me, they mean basically the same thing. And they'll say, well, what is this isn't ethical. You're bending someone's will. You're getting inside their head, and you're pre-framing them in order to accept certain outcomes. It's true. By the end of today, I hope that I'll put most of that to bed. But this is the one thing I will tell you, and it's what I tell all of my clients, is that influence has no moral compass. Kind of like money. Money doesn't have a moral compass either. It flows to the priest and the pornographer alike, right? It doesn't differentiate. It will go wherever it needs to go. And the better job you are at communicating value, the more money will flow to you. And so when we talk about influence, it is not influence or the act itself that is moral or immoral. It's how we choose to use it. And throughout the years, influence has been used to do some pretty horrific things and also some pretty great things. It's been used to enslave men and to set them free. It's been used to build nations and to tear them down. It's been used to help people solve the most difficult problems in our world. And it's also been used to fleece people out of their life savings. And so rather than address the ethics and the morality issue every single time it comes up, I'm just simply going to say, I'm going to trust you all that you are going to use the information that I present to you today and over the next 3 days in a moral and ethical way. And if you guys will agree to that, then I'm going to open up the floodgates and show you some stuff that you have never seen before and really change your entire perspective on the reality that we live in and the lives that we live. Okay? Is that fair? Okay. Now, to start off, I have been interested in, and I'm sorry, I'm going to drink a lot of water, and I hope this is really relaxed. It's supposed to be fun. I'm going to show you some really cool stuff over the next couple of hours. And I will be looking for some interaction from you guys, too, as we get a little bit further into this. Now, if you guys happen to be part of the Zoom meeting, meaning you're already ticket holders, then I just wanted to let you know when the time comes, we'll let you raise your hand and you can ask a question. You can also type it into the chat, either on YouTube or Facebook, or the chat inside of Zoom. And when we get to the Q&A section at the end, we'll draw from that and I'll answer your questions. Matt's also going to be working in the background, handling my switching, and he's my right-hand dude. So if you got questions or stuff that can't wait, you can try and pick him up in the chats and comments as well. So a little bit about me. Is there anybody, how many of the people, is there a lot of people here who don't know who I am, or most of them pretty familiar with me? Most people are familiar. Okay, good. Okay, well, let me give you the Reader's Digest version of my background. I first became, for about the last 20 years or so, I have been fascinated with how the mind works. And I have dedicated most of my working life to understanding a couple of really important things. First and foremost, human action, and secondly, decision making. And the fancy terms for that, if you're interested, are heuristics and praxeology. So feel free to Google that in your spare time. Lots of fun. But I first noticed this when I was in the Marines. See, when I was in the Marine Corps, I was part of a couple of special units. The first one was a sniper unit. And then later on in my career, I was part of a special operations unit known as Marine Force Recon. Some of you may be familiar. If not, just know it's the Marine Corps' version of like the Navy SEALs. And towards the end of my tour of duty, I was tasked with running the indoctrination platoon for new recon Marines. So I was that guy who came in and trained all the new special operations guys. And I had a team of about 5 guys, and my job was really to watch the guys who worked for me. Because what we figured out as we began to train these guys, I don't know if other people figured this out or not, but it became really apparent to me as we started to train these guys, is that they had done a really good job. Something about guys who were in special operations had some sort of disconnect between the pain sensors in their minds and their bodies and what they could do. And what we figured out, and what I had figured out as a Marine, is that my mind would quit long before my body would. And what I found was that if I continued to push myself a little bit further every single day, that eventually I'd get to a point where I could really do whatever they needed me to do. If I needed to run 13 miles, I could run 13 miles. If I had to swim across the bay, which was 8 or 10 miles, I could do that. It was really just a matter of me mentally shutting down and ignoring those pain sensors and all the normal things that would cause most people to quit. And so when we started training these new recon Marines, we noticed the same thing about them. And I realized that I had to be really careful about about how much I pushed these guys, because we could literally push them, or at least there was the fear that we could push them until they died. Like if we just asked them to run and continue to run and continue to run, some of them would literally run until their heart exploded. And that's a scary situation, because the goal is to train them to maximize their utility and maximize their mental and physical strength, but not to hurt them. And so that was kind of my first introduction into this. And then when I got out of the Marines, I ended up going and working for a private contracting firm and did some work overseas. And while I was there, I started studying financial markets. And I became a really good trader, so much so that my plan was to open up my own hedge fund. And one of the things that what I was fascinated by was how many different patterns in a market continued to repeat over and over again. That markets were predictable because humans were predictable. And because humans tend to do the same things over and over again when presented with specific stimulus, that we could find loopholes and gaps in the market that we could exploit to make money with. And I never ended up opening up that hedge fund for a variety of reasons that I will not share with you today. But what I did do was I started an education company. And I said, what I've learned, I think, has value for retail traders who are trying to learn how to make money trading stocks, commodities, and currencies. And so I founded a company called Trade Empowered. And for the next 10 years, I worked with traders to teach them the basic skills and psychological discipline to be consistently profitable traders. And after I've been doing that for 5 or 6 years, I realized that, the real money in business is figuring out how to find people who are interested in what you got and convincing them of its worth. In essence, to convince people or communicate the value of what you have to the world. And so I went one level deeper and I started applying my love and my knowledge of human behavior to marketing and advertising and branding. And I do have to give some credit where credit is due, because a lot of what we're going to talk about today are ideas that I was first exposed to by a man named Rory Sutherland. He is the chairman of Ogilvy, which is a very, very famous marketing firm. They're actually now in like 100 countries, but it started out, a man by the name of David Ogilvy founded an advertising agency that is now, Ogilvy's long dead, but the chairman of that institution now is Rory Sutherland. Rory likes to talk a lot about behavioral science and economics. He happens to believe, as I do, that when done correctly, marketing not only improves the quality of our products, it not only increases the price that we can sell at and the lessens the buyer resistance, but it also has impacts on society as a whole. That there are ways that we can actually improve our world with a better understanding of marketing. But you see, for a lot of people, marketing is somewhat of we don't really understand what it is. Branding too, for that matter. And if you are a little confused about the difference between branding and marketing, it should come as no surprise, because if we go to someplace, let's say the American Marketing Association, and we ask them, the people who are supposed to know what this stuff is and to be able to relay this information to the world, this is what they say marketing is. Say marketing is the activity, set of institutions and processes for creating, communicating, delivering, and exchanging offerings that have value to customers, clients, partners, and society at large. Yeah. No confusion there, is it? I'm not surprised. Man, I can't believe that nobody knows what marketing is. How on earth could you be confused about what marketing is and what you're supposed to be doing with a definition like that? Well, let's try branding. Let's see of course, branding's really just a form of marketing, isn't it? Well, what is branding according to the American Marketing Association? A brand is a name, term, design, symbol, or any other feature that identifies one seller's goods or services as distinct from those of another seller's. A brand is an intangible asset that is intended to create distinctive images and associations in the minds of stakeholders, thereby generating economic benefit/values. Again, wow. Team of monkeys working round the clock to come up with those definitions. This is definition by committee. It's got to be the worst possible thing that you could have put together on paper. This is a bunch of people, analytical, like brainy, weirdos sitting around a room who are coming up, and I can just hear them now all sitting in the room together. Like, oh, no, you can't say that. Well, we've got to include designs. Well, we've got to include symbols, too. Well, I really think it's a distinctive images and associations. Stakeholders, we better include stakeholders in there, too, because it can't just be people. It's got to be stakeholders. And you get this. So I want to try and simplify it for you today. And these are some things that will be helpful to write down, because everything else we do is going to kind of be principally based on these concepts. So if we know that influence is the ability to modify or control someone's thoughts, beliefs, or actions, basically, what do they focus on? What do they think about what they focus on, or what do they feel about what they focus on? And then what action do they take based on those associations? Okay, that's what influence is. What is marketing? Very simply, let's go with a brand first. A brand is a unique promise of value. It's not whatever this crap is, which makes no sense at all. It's very simply a unique promise of value. It's what is the promise above and beyond the utility of whatever it is that you sell. And by that same, in that same vein, marketing is the science of communicating value, or more specifically, the science of communicating your unique value to the world. And when we talk about influential communication and branding, what we are talking about is, in essence, marketing. It's how do we articulate our unique value to the world. Now, as I said before, if we can become and increase and have a better understanding of what marketing is and how our minds work and the way that we make decisions, I think ultimately we can not only create better outcomes for ourselves, we can increase the price that we charge for our good or our service while decreasing the amount of overwhelm that we have in our lives. But it also has value far beyond that we can actually improve our world. And so I thought I would start out today with a big, bold claim. And I'm going to need a bit of buy-in from you from this. It's something that I need you to suspend your disbelief for a moment and just assume for a moment, give me some latitude to prove to you that this statement is true. We are all delusional. There is not a single person here who is living in an objective reality. Now, I know what some of you are saying. You're saying, wow, this is objective truth. Don't shut off on me, okay? Don't bring your preconceived notions or ideas into this. It's really important, okay? Because reality is really just the perception of what we see around us, how we perceive the world around us. That's our reality. And what I intend to show you over the course of the next hour and a half or so is that none of us perceive the world as it is. We perceive it only in context. And not only am I going to show this to you, but once I'm done showing it to you, you will be wholly and completely unable to escape the delusion. You're going to be trapped in it. For the rest of your life, you're going to know that you are living and seeing a lie. And you won't have anything you can do about it. You just have to learn to live with it. Okay? Sound good? Okay. So let's talk a little bit. I got some notes down here just so I don't lose my place, but let's talk for a minute about what reality is. Let me bring out my little marker here. What is reality? Okay. Well, certainly colors would be part of our reality. Okay. The color that we see, the shapes, sounds. What else? What else do I got here? Smells. That's another good one. Okay. This is pretty much, if we talk about the reality, the shapes, the sounds, the smells, the colors that we see form our reality. Okay? The problem is, without context, none of this makes any sense. It's like a small child when they're experiencing life for the first time, and they're trying to figure out and see their hands and figure out what it means to have fingers and the colors and the space. None of it makes any sense. Matt's got a little son right now, and so he's experiencing this right now for the first time, is seeing a child actually become aware of their surroundings for the first time. What's happening is that every day that baby is alive, it's creating context. It's learning about its environment and its relationship within its environment. And the crazy thing is without that sort of context, we don't have any reality. We live in total confusion. And so if we go one level deeper than that and we ask, well, what is our reality shaped by? It's really shaped by three things, okay? It's shaped by one, evolution. Okay. Evolution, yep. 2, education. And 3, our experiences. These are really good to write down, by the way, if you haven't written them down. Okay? So, colors, shapes, sounds, and smells are what kind of constitute our reality, but what shapes and gives meaning to these shapes and colors and whatnot is first our evolution. And evolution is subconscious and instinctual. It's things that have happened over the course of, millions of years of our evolution. Or if you happen to not believe in that, you believe that, we were spontaneously created by the Almighty. I play no judgment either way. I'm saying then you have to believe that at some point that was instituted in us, that there is some sort of innate structure that helps us frame up the world around us, okay? So I'm going to speak from it from an evolutionary point, not because I believe that is more valuable than a religious context, but because it's easier for me just to use one rather than the other, okay? The second one is education. So this is what we're taught, what we learn in school. That it's wrong to hit Susie, or, it's wrong, if you go to the church, it's wrong to have sex before you get married, right? These are educational things that define our reality, what is acceptable, what is moral, etc. And then finally are our experiences, the things that we actually see and do on our own that give life context and meaning. So, for example, every child, we know, which camera am I looking at here? This one? Okay, sorry. I need to get a monitor so I know which camera we're on. I should have done that. That would have been smart. Okay, I've spent all this time setting up this set. It would have been nice to get a monitor for myself. We'll fix that tomorrow. So everyone who's ever had kids knows that there's that point where the kid goes up to the stove when the pan is on or when the fire is on and ends up putting their hand down in the fire. And if you're lucky, you grab the hand and you yank the kid away and you go, no, 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 no. Okay? That's an experience that child's having that tells them and sets a precedent that says, oh, this is bad. Because in reality, we don't really know. Our mind has no real concept of good or bad, fast or slow, hot or cold. It's all relative. So we don't have fast or slow. We just simply have faster than we expected or slower than we expected. And it's this generality and this kind of guesswork that we do every single day that actually helps us make decisions. And as crazy as this sounds, stick with me because I'm going to show you some really great examples of this, of how your mind is actually not designed to be accurate. You're not designed to perceive the world correctly. Your mind is designed for fitness. How do I make things that don't make sense so that I can then make the best decision possible for my longevity as a species and as an individual, okay? Now, first guys to kind of figure this out were two guys named Kahneman and Tversky. And we're going to talk a little bit about David Kahneman here, Daniel Kahneman is his name. He was a psychologist who happened to think that all of the economic models that we had set up were completely false. See, prior to him coming along in the 1970s, it was generally believed that every human being weighed all of their options and came to the most logical decision possible. It was believed, for example, that if you went to the store to buy a TV, what you would do is you would gather as much information as you needed to make the best decision for you, and then you would buy the best TV for the money you had available. This is what they believed. And Kahneman and Tversky thought, I don't think this is true. I think that there's some more to this. I think that there's some subconscious stuff going on that cause us to make some very different decisions. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the two of them in a minute and show you some studies they did. But what Kahneman came away with was the idea that we really have two brains. We have a system 1 and system 2 is what he called it. See, we tend to think that in conscious or subconscious, right? Right? This is the way we think. We think, oh, I have a conscious mind and I have a subconscious mind. But the truth is, that's not at all how our mind works. So there is a subconscious part and there is a conscious part, but really what we have is we have system 1 and system 2. And I just realized these are backwards. So, in your mind, make those reverse. So system 1 is kind of like the subconscious mind. Okay? It's reactionary and instinctive. it acts automatically with little to no effort on your part. So it's the stuff that just goes on without you really having to think about it. It's the autopilot part of your brain. Now, some of that is subconscious, is evolutionary, but it doesn't have to be, as I'll show you in a minute. The system 2 is the deductive part. It's the actual thinking and rational part of your brain that comes to conclusions after energy is expended to find the correct answer, or what we perceive as the correct answer. System 2 is really expensive in terms of energy. System 1 is not. So our brain naturally tries to do as much from System 1 as it possibly can. Now, this is going to be important. I really am getting to something here as it relates to marketing and influential communication. But this brain stuff is really, really powerful. So we want to work out of System 1. The only time we work out of System 2 is when we're forced to, or when we need a justification for why we want to do what we're doing. So let me give you an example. Kahneman had an experiment he ran. And this is going to be really interesting for you guys. So I want you to, as fast as you can, answer the following math problem. What's 2 plus 2? Now, instinctively, you probably said 4. So we can do this again. We'll play a game. What's 1 plus 1 is? 2 plus 2 is? 4 plus 4 is? You don't even need to think about it. It's just instinctual. Now, that's not a byproduct of evolution. That's a byproduct of education and repetition. So you've built a System 1 activity in your mind, not off of some subconscious, deep-rooted lizard brain sort of decision-making, but more out of just education and repetition. And this is why I say System 1 can be subconscious and evolutionary, but it doesn't have to be. Now answer this one, another math problem for you. 18 times 26, go. Come on, fast as you can. Now, most of you, if you're like me, you got to take your shoes off, count your toes and then write it out. You still can't get it right. Most people, if they think about this for any length of time, could probably do it in their head. Everybody could do it with a calculator or with pen and paper, right? If you're over the age of 10. But that 18 times 26, that's a System 2 brain. That's a System 2 brain activity. It requires conscious, active thought, and you have to expend a lot of energy to come up with the answer. Does that make sense? Okay, now, moving right along, let's see. Now, John Haidt wrote a fantastic book that every one of you should read called The Righteous Mind. And in it, he talks a little bit about this System 1 versus System 2, the conscious versus the unconscious. And he said, our conscious mind thinks that we're the Oval Office, or it thinks that it's the Oval Office, when in reality, it's really probably more like the press office. What he means by that is, just like a press office tries to come up with a logical and rational reason for why you took a specific activity, the press office tries to spin the story to be most beneficial to whoever the story is about. Your conscious mind does the same thing. Instead of, when you think about why you did a specific thing, your conscious mind is going to search for what's the most plausible reason why I did this thing that is going to be the most believable and is going to do the least amount of damage to me. And then that's typically the answer that we come up with. And it's very, very hard for us to see this because our two systems, they don't talk to each other. Our conscious and our unconscious, they don't really communicate with each other. So it's impossible to truly know the rationale for the unconscious mind. And this is what's really amazing and fascinating about behavioral science, is that we can't know what the unconscious mind is thinking, what the System 1 is doing. All we can do is take a look at the result of certain activities under certain conditions. And when I'm going to show you some stuff that is really, really fascinating, but I want to talk to you a little bit about how we can use this. So System 1 and System 2 don't talk to each other. And we know that most of the stuff's happening on System 1 side because it requires the least amount of energy and is the most efficient way to operate. Then we can do some things to manipulate our reality. So, for example, I talk a lot about the difference between facts and truth, and that there is a very distinctive difference between what is true and what is factual. Let me explain, give you a couple of examples. So, hang on, go back in. One of the things that your conscious mind will do, or that your mind will do, even if you don't want it to, is it will begin to fill in the gaps. As I said before, we work largely from imperfect information. And based on our evolution, our education, and our experiences, we will begin to fill in the gaps if we need to in order to craft a story that we believe is plausible. So take a look at this image. Now, I picked this image because it was designed to elicit a very emotional response from you. Now, we don't know what's going on in this image, but we're going to infer a lot of stuff, aren't we? Guy holding a belt, kid curled up in the corner. What is the assumption? This kid's about ready to catch a beating, right? This is, if you grew up in a house where this was common, if you have seen this on movies or in TV, you elicit an emotional response to something that hasn't happened. And this is the incredible thing about imagery and about context there's no reason why we should be doing. There's no reason we should infer anything from this image. But because we have context, history, education, and experience, we make an assumption as to what's going to happen next. And understanding this, there are people who seek to manipulate what we would consider facts or we would consider reality in a way that's going to cause us to believe one thing over another. So let's go ahead. Let's talk about Donald Trump, Colgate, and Italian rapists. Yep, I'll give you a minute to giggle. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to give you some facts, some accurate facts about each one of these things, Donald Trump, Colgate, and Italian rapists. And then I'm going to explain to you how every single one of these facts is completely untrue. Okay? So first of all, let's go with old Donald Trump. Donald Trump created more jobs in a single year than Obama did his 8 years in office. Now, I have selected examples that are designed to elicit as much of an emotional response as possible so that hopefully you'll be a little heated when you hear this stuff. So if you are a Donald Trump fan, what is your knee-jerk reaction? Damn right. Damn right he did. Created so many jobs. He's the best president that's ever had. He's a second coming. Freaking Messiah. Right? If you are an anti-Trump, if you're an anti-Trumper, your gut reaction is, that can't be right. And see, what happens in the back of our minds is based on our experience, our education, our previous belief system, is that we make an assumption. We ask one of two questions. We ask either, must I believe this, or can I believe this? So if you are a Trump supporter, your first question is, can I believe this? And 99% of the time, the answer is going to be yes. Why? Because we are going to go find the justification we need to believe it. If you are an Obama supporter, a Biden supporter, you're going to look at that same statement and say, must I believe this? Do I have to believe this? And most of the time, I would say probably 99% of the time, the answer will be no, you don't. We will go in search, it's called confirmation bias. So we go and look for the things that either prove or disprove our underlying belief. Now, what about this is untrue? Well, it is actually factual that Donald Trump did create, that more jobs were created in a single year under the Donald Trump presidency than in all 8 years Obama was in office. It is also true that the previous 3 months before that, Donald Trump oversaw the largest reduction in jobs in American history. Something like 30 or 40 million jobs were lost, and then in a single year, 20 million of them came back, which is, I think on balance, he ended up creating about 8 million in a single year, and Obama, the best he did was 6 million over the course of 8 years. A lot of numbers in there. Point is, it's truthful, it's accurate, it's just not truthful. It's a way to try and bend you one way or the other. Let's try another one. Oh, I forgot to change it. Out of 10 dentists recommend, 8 out of 10 dentists recommend Colgate to their patients. This is an accurate statistic. Okay? 8 out of 10 dentists do recommend Colgate. The problem is the FCC made Colgate remove this from their advertising. Why? Because when they went to survey the dentist, they allowed the dentist to select multiple toothpastes. And so when given the option to select multiple toothpastes, 8 out of 10 dentists did end up recommending Colgate. They might have also recommended half a dozen other brands of toothpaste. The real question I have is, that means 20% of people, given multiple options, dentists did not recommend Colgate. That ought to cause you to scratch your head a little bit, right? So is it factual? Yes, it is. But it doesn't tell the whole story. And when you're given all of the context, you would come to a very different conclusion. See, the problem is that very rarely are we working with absolute knowledge, with absolute trust. And most of the time we're balancing what we know and understand with the available information, and we're trying to judge how much do I trust the information that I'm being given based on the source. Okay, let's try one more. 60% of rapes in Italy are committed by Italians. This was put out by the Italian government because there was a growing concern among Italians for immigrants who are coming into the country and supposedly raping their women. And while this is factual, only 40% of rapes occur from immigrants. In Italy, like 92% of the entire population are Italians, meaning only about 8% are immigrants. So if you actually look at this, 40% of the rapes come from 8% of the population. And so I broke it out. I said of 100,000 Italians, roughly 7 of them are going to be rapists, which is an alarming enough statistic if you think about it. This is like 7 out of every 100,000 people are actual rapists. When you look at the same 100,000 immigrants, the number of rapists jumps to 34 in every 100,000. So it is, it's not nearly as appealing now to say only 40% of rapes come from non-Italians. And so again, given all of the information and complete understanding of the information, we make very different conclusions or draw very different assumptions. Again, the problem is that we're very rarely dealing with accurate information or total information and total trust. We can also modify someone's belief and how they interpret information by how we display it. So again, remember, I'm picking things that are designed to elicit strong emotional responses from you. And I apologize if any of this is offensive, but it's the best way that I know to get the information across to you. So take a look at this. It's Planned Parenthood. Abortions are up. Life-saving procedures are down. And this is, again, an accurate statistic. The numbers in there are accurate. The problem is how they're displayed on the graph is not proportional. It's not displayed to you accurately. In this graph, it would appear as though abortions have doubled while life-saving procedures has gone down by an equal measure. In reality, when you plot it correctly on the graph, it looks like this. Yes, of course, cancer screenings and other preventative services have gone down, but abortions have only gone up marginally. And this is why it's really, really important that we do everything we can to maintain our objectivity and as best we can to question. So Kinnaman, in his book, Think Fast, Then Slow, said the best thing that we can do when dealing with System 1 and System 2 brain function is to take as much time as we can. The faster we have to respond, the less likely we are to actually have any objective measure, and we're going to base our entire decision off of education, experience, and our evolution. Okay? We don't do any deductive reasoning when we're forced to move quickly. Here's another one. Polling questions. So, in America, politics is like a sport. And one of the big things, if you're in this country, is, you typically don't like paying taxes. Even if you're in favor of raising other people's taxes, you typically don't like paying your own. So here are 2 ways to frame the same question that will elicit almost always completely different responses. First question, do you believe that you should be taxed so other citizens don't have to work? When you ask this question, overwhelmingly, Americans say no. We should not be taxed so that other people can sit around and not work. But if we ask it a different way, we get a very different response. Do you think government should provide some support to those who cannot find work? In this case, Majority of people say yes, that they're fine with the government assuming some charitable role in a society. Now, your own personal opinion on this is irrelevant to this conversation. What's important is that you understand that reality isn't fixed, that we don't have an objective measure of what is good or what is bad, or there is no unit of measurement for happiness in our brain. Okay? We think that we make logical decisions based on facts, and in reality, what we're doing is we're making our best guess based on the information available and our imperfect understanding of it. Okay? And if you had any question in your mind whether or not this is true, what I am about to show you is going to prove it to you. Now, I told you before that we are living in a delusion, that we do not see what we think we see, that we do not hear what we think we hear. And the only reason that this is allowed to maintain is because we all are living in the same delusion. So I want you to watch this video I'm going to play for you. It's about a psychological principle called the McGurk effect. And it's going to explain just how crazy this world and how fragile our reality really is. Go ahead, Matt.
Ba, ba, ba.
Have a look at this. What do you hear?
Ba, ba, ba. Ba, ba, ba.
But look what happens when we change the picture.
Ba, ba, ba. Ba, ba, ba. Ba.
And yet, the sound hasn't changed. In every clip, you are only ever hearing ba with a B.
Ba, ba, ba.
It's an illusion known as the McGurk effect.
Ba.
Take another look.
Ba.
Concentrate first on the right of the screen.
Ba.
Now to the left of the screen.
Ba.
The illusion occurs because what you are seeing clashes with what you are hearing.
Ba. In the illusion, what we see overrides what we hear. So the mouth movements we see as we look at a face can actually influence what we believe we're hearing. If we close our eyes, we actually hear the sound as it is. If we open our eyes, we actually see how the mouth movements can influence what we're hearing. Ba, ba, ba.
It's a bizarre effect. Remember, the only sound you're hearing is ba with a B.
Ba, 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 ba.
What's remarkable about this illusion is even knowing how it's done doesn't seem to make a difference.
Ba. The effect works no matter how much you know about the effect. I've been studying the McGurk effect for 25 years now, and I've been the face in the stimuli. I've seen stimuli thousands and thousands of times, but the effect still works on me. I can't help it. Ba, ba.
Matt, we're good with that. So you see, we don't actually see reality the way it is. We see only the reality that makes sense to us. And the easiest way that this has ever been explained to me is to say that we are not built for accuracy. Our brain isn't built for accuracy, it's built for fitness. Meaning, how do I make sense of the world around me? If you think of this evolutionary wise, is that the right? That's not even right. If you think about this in terms of our evolution, this makes a lot of sense. Because what we're really concerned with is longevity. How do we stay alive? How do we procreate? How do we get back to, how do we ensure that we'll live and that our children will live and that their children will live? And that has nothing to do with accurately perceiving the world around us. It has everything to do with making things fit in a way that allows us to make pretty good judgments about what we need to be doing. Another great example of this is this image here. So if you take a look at this, I do not know the name of this image, but what's interesting about it is every single one of those circles are all the same color. And if you don't believe me, cover up all but two of the images, two of them that are side by side, and just hold your hands up to the screen, and you'll be able to see that each one of them is the same color. But yet when you look at it from afar and you perceive all of them at once, they all look different colors. Some of them look purple, some of them look orange or yellow. Now, the reason that this particular effect works is because all of your TV screens are RGB, red, green, and blue, which means that in order for them to show a purple or a yellow or an orange or something like that, they have to blend two colors together. And essentially, your eye creates the purple out of thin air. It creates the orange out of thin air because it thinks that's what it's supposed to see. So when you see all of these blue and green lines running through these dots, it confuses your brain. And your brain doesn't really know what color to translate that into, so it just guesses. But when we look at them in isolation, it's clear that they're exactly the same image. Now here's another really cool one. Check this out. Well, it looks like the path on the right is veering off at a much steeper angle than the road on the left, when in reality, this is exactly the same picture. Take a minute and look at it. Take a look at the road, take a look at the position of the little light post at the top. You're going to see that they're exactly the same image. In fact, if I lay them right on top of each other, you can see those are exactly the same picture. And you say, well, why on earth does it look like, oh, hang on, what did I do? Why on earth does it look like that in one picture and it looks like this one in another? What is causing that? Well, it's an optical illusion in your eye, because your eye thinks that if this road is slanting at the right, that this one needs to go at a steeper angle in order for it to make sense spatially. It views these two pictures as a single image. It doesn't view them as two separate images. And so in order to make it work in your mind, it makes the one on the right look like it jaunts off at a more extreme angle, when in fact they're going at exactly the same place. Now I show you all of this to show you that your mind plays tricks on you all the time. You hear things that you don't hear. You see things that you don't see. You live in this beautiful, wonderful delusion that all of us live in. And as I said, the reason that this happens is because we weren't built for accuracy. We were built for fitness. And the one thing that we crave more than anything as human beings is certainty. And this is where we get to the real meat of it. This is the really important part. But it's not certainty like the guarantee of an outcome as much as it is a guarantee against a catastrophic outcome. Okay? So think about it like this. We think that when we go to buy something, as I said before, that we're looking for the highest quality product that we can find for the money we have to spend, right? That's what we're looking for. And we believe that we go in and we weigh the pros and cons and we look at all the different options, and then we make a logical choice based on all of the information available. And in reality, we do nothing like that. Nobody does. And this is what's important for you, your buyers, and the people that you're trying to influence, is that when we go to buy something, we typically are asking two questions. Number one, how good is this purchase likely to be? That's number one. Number two, what is the worst that could happen? Okay? And what's the worst that could happen is really, really, really important. It's far more important than how good is this likely to be, or is this the very best option for me? We're not just trying to optimize for the best possible outcome. We're actually primarily concerned with minimizing what's called downside variance. And ladies and gentlemen, if you need the proof of this, I'm going to come back to Kahneman and Tversky now. Get through here. So as a funny, Tversky's actually dead. Kahneman is still alive and is still writing books and papers and stuff. I said his most recent one, Think Fast, Then Slow, is a phenomenal book for you all to read. But one of the things Tversky said was, he said, some people study artificial intelligence. He said, we study natural stupidity, which is a pretty good definition of what behavioral economics is and behavioral science. Is it's studying why do we act in seemingly irrational ways? And more importantly, why do we act irrationally in predictable ways? And they came up with a little study. They went out and said, we think all of you economists are just flat out wrong about the way we make decisions and the way our brains work. And they crafted they crafted a lot of different examples and a lot of different studies to try and prove this. But one of the ones that is most interesting that you may have heard of before is they asked a group of people, they said, oh, hang on. They said, would you like to have $100 today or $130 tomorrow? Now, which way do you think, those of you who are in our little room here, which one do you think most people picked? I'm just asking those of you who are in the Zoom room. That way I don't have to wait on the delay.
100 today, tomorrow, today. Most people 100 today, tomorrow for 130 today, tomorrow.
Got it.
100.
Overwhelmingly, people chose the $100 today. Probably like to 80 to 20. They chose the $100 today. And one of the problems, well, I won't get into that right now, but they said, okay, all right, well, that makes sense. So they value certainty of money today over money tomorrow, which would be less certain. Then they asked another question. They said, well, would you rather have $100 in 30 days or $130 in 31 days? What do you think the response was then? Mm-hmm.
31 days, 130, 131, and 31.
Yeah.
130.
So now you guys are catching on. So it just reversed, right? Overwhelmingly, people were willing to wait the extra day to get the $130. Now, why is this? See, from our basic understanding of economics, this makes no sense because it's the same 24 hours. What's the difference between a day? Well, it turns out that there's a huge difference between waiting 31 days or instantly, or waiting 1 day. It's a massive difference. And what they said was there's a function in our brain called hyperbolic discounting. Of course, that's the fancy name for it. But what it basically says is that the value we place on rewards diminishes really quickly and then very slowly over time. So when we're offered $100, our brain isn't just saying, well, I want the sure thing. Okay? It's also asking what's the worst that could happen. Well, the worst that could happen was the guy doesn't show up the next day with the other $30, that he spends the money, that he gets killed when he leaves, and you're not going to get the $30. There's a lot that can happen in the urgency of that moment. But when we draw time out to 30, 31 days and we offer them the same thing, they're thinking, well, so much time has gone by already. What is the extra day? It really doesn't matter. In their minds, they treat time differently. And they treat the value of a reward differently based on the time. We actually did this as a study here for this event. Many of you know, if you signed up before today, one of the things that I let you do was I said, you don't have to pay till after the event's over. You can attend all 3 days. I'm going to walk you through all the stuff that we're going to learn. I'm going to show you and open your eyes up to a completely different world, and you don't actually have to pay until after the event is over. Part of that was because I wanted to run the experiment and just see, okay, how were you more likely to buy because you valued your money less tomorrow than you do today? Would I get more sales than last year because of the way I offered the event to you? I made a point the other day. I was talking with some people on my podcast, and I said, I had to drive over to AAA, or not the DMV, I go to AAA, to get my tags renewed, because it's January and I was supposed to get them renewed and I didn't. So now it's February and I'm not supposed to be driving around. I'm just waiting to get a ticket. And so I drove over the AAA to get it done. And the question was, well, why didn't I do it early? Like, why didn't I get it done in January? It wasn't like they didn't try and incentivize me to do it. The state of California actually sent me all the paperwork in the mail. All I had to do was write a check and send it back to them, and they just sent me all of my stuff, and it would have been done, and I wouldn't have had to worry about it. So why did I procrastinate? Well, it has to do with hyperbolic discounting. You see, I valued my time today in January more than I valued it in February. So much so that I didn't take the time in January to do what needed to be done, knowing full well that in February I'd have to spend more time than in January. Now, some of you think that that's completely irrational. You're just like, why on earth would you do that? I don't do that. Well, you might not do it with your tags, but you do it with a host of other things. And so does every other person in the world. I mentioned Rory Sutherland before. This is one of the quotes that he has. He says, "The human mind doesn't run on logic any more than a horse runs on petrol. Buyers usually care less about perfection and more about avoiding catastrophe." You see, what we're really concerned with, as I said before, is not making a catastrophic mistake. And both evolutionarily, education, and experience-wise, this makes a lot of sense. Because we can come back from a bad decision. We're comfortable with something that's pretty good, even though it may not be the best, as long as we believe the risk to the downside is relatively limited. It's only when we start staring at potential catastrophic loss that we become really concerned. And as near as I can tell, there are 5 primary values that we look for. And these are also in the order that I think most people put them in. Now, you may be slightly different than this, but I think you'll notice that each and every one of us desire these things in one form, in one order or another. The first one, as I said, was certainty, or more accurately, a minimizing the downside variance of risk. Second is status or significance. Every one of us wants to feel important. Every one of us wants to feel valued. Every one of us wants to believe that we have worth and that we are here for a reason, okay? And we like it when other people point that out and show and tell us that. Third is love and connection. Every single one of us craves community, craves love and affection from someone else. Again, this goes back to really feeling valued, okay? You notice very emotional stuff, right? Third is autonomy, or the ability to choose, or in the absence of the ability to choose, at least the perceived ability to choose. Because some of the things that we can do, I'll show you later with forced choice, is a way to give someone the appearance of choice without actually giving them any choice. And then finally, last but not least, is fairness. And I think this is perhaps the most undervalued and underrated emotion that we as marketers and as human beings overlook. It is a huge part of our decision making, and the way and whether we perceive something as fair or not is whether or not we're going to like it. And as we get deeper into the discussion, I'll give you some examples of this when fairness really got. Well, I'll give you one right now. Take a look at Texas. There's not an economist in the world that wouldn't tell you that the right decision in an arena where electricity is extremely scarce, because you had that cold front that, I don't know if you, outside the US, we had a huge cold front that hit, polar vortex came all the way down into Texas, and electric bills shot through the roof. People were using a ton of electricity, and the power grid just couldn't support it. It wasn't built to have to give that much electricity. Well, any economist will tell you the right decision would be to increase prices of electricity until there's a reduction in the use. The problem is that you had to increase the price so rapidly that people didn't have a time to really adjust and pay attention to those prices and get a feeling for what it was going to cost. And so you had people living in 1,200 square foot apartments that had $4,000 electric bills because of the 2-week deep freeze. Not only is the state of California looking at these electric companies for criminal charges, but there's a pretty good chance that they are going to be held liable for financially for the losses. Now that makes no logical sense, because they weren't doing anything unfair. In fact, they were following good economic principles to try and conserve resources. Doesn't make any difference. It's perceived by the public as unfair. All you got to do is show some 22-year-old who's trying to work their way through college, or some single mom who's 35 with 3 kids who's got a $4,000 electric bill to pay, and people will be screaming. They'll be looking for blood. So fairness has a huge impact on who we like, who we trust, and who we want to do business with. It's also why it is so important that we spend time building a brand. Now, Before I actually get into brand building, let me just ask you, do we have any questions so far?
There was a question related to the 18 times 26.
Okay.
He said if system 1 and system 2 don't communicate, why did I look at 18 times 26 as 10 times 25 plus 8 times 25 plus the 18 solve problems?
So he's asking if the system 1 and system 2 don't talk together, why did he have a computation in his mind to help work the problem? 18 times 26. So what you really did was you may have had a rehearsal, but if it required active energy on your part to run through that, so you actually had to run the computation, that's a system 2 activity, right? 2 plus 2, I don't actually have to figure that out in my mind. 1 plus 1 is 2. It's ingrained into us. And so that's the difference, is that if you're actually actively creating the computation, that's a system 2 activity. Okay? Anything else? How are we doing? Somebody talk to me.
People are really into it. One guy said that he says, anyone else is reminded of a church when you see the studio set up?
This is the best I could do, folks. Next year we'll have a big event and bring everybody out. Today we're just going to have to do it this way. Okay. Well, so let's talk for a little bit about brand and why brand is so important. We ignore this part to your own detriment, okay? This is so really, really important stuff. So as I said before, a brand is a unique promise of value. And the reason that a brand is so important is that it is, in a way, a guarantee of low variance risk. Let me say that again. A brand is in part a guarantee of low variance. When we see a brand that everybody else is buying, we assume, or a name brand, we assume that not necessarily that it's better, but that there's less risk of a catastrophic outcome. There's less risk that we're going to get a really bad experience with Cheerios versus Tastios. There's a less of a chance in our minds that if we buy Tide, that we'll have less of a chance of ruining all of our clothes than if we buy some no-name brand from the bottom shelf that we've never heard of before. And when you think about this, instead of certainty, because for a long time this is the way I thought about it. I thought, well, people want certainty, and this is why we got risk reversals, and this is why we have offer stacking and all this other stuff, is that we build this stuff in so that we can remove as much risk and provide as much certainty as possible. What we really are doing, though, is we're removing the risk of a catastrophic loss. And this explains a lot of things, doesn't it? It explains why social proof. Everybody here knows that we're supposed to have social proof because every marketing idiot on the planet who's ever stepped into social media says, oh, social proof's important. It's critical to your business to have social proof and testimonials. But why? Why is it important? It's important because it minimizes the risk of a downside variance. We believe that if 100 other people are online talking about a product, that it must be good. We believe that if we see everybody wearing the latest dress or the new pair of shoes, that if we buy one of those, there's a little less risk that we're going to be made fun of when we walk into the office. These are the types of, once you understand that what we're really after at a core foundational level is to not make any serious mistakes, it changes everything. All of a sudden, all the decisions that we make, all this stuff that you've been learning about sales and marketing and branding and all this stuff, all of it makes sense because we're minimizing the downside. And when it comes to that unique promise of value, when we're on the buyer's journey, so take a look at this. So you have awareness here at the top. So somebody becomes aware of you, and then they finally come in and they're considering your product, right? There is now, the old way of looking at funnels was that it just looked like a funnel, right? But this is actually a more accurate representation of what your buyer is doing when they come through the journey with you, is that there's actually this research and discovery loop, isn't it? You can think about the last time you went to buy something. You went and you looked at it, and then looked at the reviews on Amazon, so a little bit of social proof, how many other people have bought it, what are they thinking about it, how many reviews do they have, X, Y, and Z, right? Minimizing downside variance. Then you did what? Let's say it was somebody like me, If you're seeing me for the first time, or if you're thinking about attending this event, what'd you do? Who is this guy? Let me Google him. Where's he been? Does he have any other videos? Does he have a Facebook page? Does he have a YouTube page? Who is this person? Minimizing downside variance. That's what it's all about. Then you purchase, post-purchase experience, then you go into the loyalty loop. Loyalty loop is nothing more than you now becoming an advocate of this person. You now become the person who helps others determine whether or not doing business with me or someone else is going to be risky or not. Okay? Now, in the absence of this, we have no context. We don't have any idea how to value a product or an idea or a concept or a belief. We need the context. And this is kind of a cool thing. So I want you to, this will take a little bit of time. I'll let it run for you. But what you're going to see is in a minute, I'm going to make this train move. And if you look at the train hard enough, you are going to be able to make the train go one way or the other. So stare at it, and if you see it coming towards you, then focus on it and try and get it to go the other way. And if you blink, sometimes if you blink, it helps. So if you blink, it'll go one way, and if you blink the other way, it'll go the other way. Okay? Just make it work. When you see it, let me know. It's pretty freaking crazy. How cool is that? I'm doing it now. Well, the first time I saw this, I sat there for like 10 minutes doing this. I'm like, this is crazy. I sent it to everybody I knew. I'm like, look at this. Can you do it? And it's like, now I can't stop. Right? Now, why is it? Why can we make the movement go either way? Well, we can do it. We could come off now. We're just going to keep doing it, right? The reason that we can make the train go either direction is because we have no other context in the image. The rest of the image is completely still. Nobody's moving back and forth. We have no sense of spatial awareness and time. All we have is one item moving in space. Again, this is just further evidence that we're not really seeing reality, that there is no such thing as reality, that we don't have any objective measure of value. Okay? Everything is subjective. This is actually a belief that the Austrian economists have held for a long time. Adam Smith, the godfather, what we call the godfather of economics, in his book Human Action, actually never had a single mathematical equation. He just simply talked about these principles. And what's crazy to think about is that we don't actually, everything that we know about the mind and how we make decisions and behavior from an actual scientific standpoint, we have only learned in the last 50 years. It's crazy. And we've learned more in the last 20 years about behavior and the human mind and how we make decisions than we have known throughout all of history combined. This is a brand new frontier. And what it teaches us has uncalculable value, not just to you and I as individuals and as business owners, but also to the world at large. Some other things that are examples of this. So let's take a look at a couple of other things that I think will be valuable to you as well, that kind of reinforce this notion that what we're really looking to do is minimize downside variance, okay? So habits and social copying. Let's talk about habits. Vacations. How many of you go to kind of the same vacation every year? Like you got your spot. And every year, or as a kid, you kind of had your spot, and your family went to the lake every summer. You go to the same place for Christmas every year. You like Cancun, right? Maybe you bought real estate, or you own a timeshare down there. Anybody here like that? Okay. Why is that? Why do people do that? Lots of people do it. Is it because they have the best time ever at that place? No. The reason you continue to go back to the same place over and over again is because you're like, oh, you know what? I had a pretty good time last time I was there. And I imagine if I go back there, that I'm also going to have a pretty good time, that my money will likely be well spent there. Likewise, but on the flip side of that coin, I could go someplace I'd never been before, and I could have an even better time. But there's a chance that it might completely suck, and I'm going to blow my entire vacation. So what we do is we go back to the same place over and over and over again. Restaurants. Now, I know you guys do this. How many of you guys go to the same restaurants? I live in Los Angeles. I live in the mecca of good food. Okay? There are more new, amazing restaurants opening up in this city than we can even go to. And still, Nancy and I have probably half a dozen restaurants that we love going to. One of them is up the road here at the Beaumont. We also like the Henry and a couple of other places. They're not even that great of restaurants, but it's outdoor seating. They let me bring the dog, and I know that I know the quality of the meal there is going to be consistent. So we tend to go back to the same restaurants over and over and over again, as most of us do. Again, that's not because we think we get the best food there. It's because, it's pretty good. And I know that going somewhere else, is there going to be parking there? Will there be the valet? Is there going to be seating? Do I got to call ahead? What's the wait going to be? All of these unknowns. I could end up having just a terrible time and being hungry and having to go somewhere else. So we tend to do the same things. What about vehicles? Okay. You got to buy the same kind of car. Ford versus Chevy. Maybe arguably the most heated and exciting sort of like vehicle controversy or a vehicle, like head-to-head matchup in history. The Ford F-150 versus the, Chevy Silverado 1500, right? I worked at a body shop when I was a kid, after I got out of the Marines, changing oil. I knew how to do nothing else but change oil, by the way. Still don't know. But I couldn't find the carburetor in the car if you needed me to. But it was funny because the guy who owned the shop was a Chevy man. And I remember every time a Ford would come in to be broken down, he'd just be, well, should have bought a Chevy. And it's interesting to me because Ford spent just a ridiculous amount of money over the course of about 12 to 18 months to try and convert Chevy buyers into Ford buyers. Because they thought, well, we got all this, we're having these wars and we're fighting over each other. Man, there's a ton of people who buy Chevys. If we could just figure out how to get them to buy a Ford, we could begin to pull market share away from them. And we could build on what we've already got. What they found was the cost to acquire a Ford buyer was more than the profit that they got from the Ford that they sold. Significantly more, so much so that they had to give up on the campaign. And what they realized was it's far easier to take a Ford guy and get him to buy a new Ford every few years than it is to try and convince a Chevy guy to become a Ford guy. Okay? Why is that? It ain't because Ford's better than Chevy or vice versa. It's because if you've owned a Ford and you've been happy with it, you buy another one. Because the risk of going somewhere else could be catastrophic. And the vehicle you got right now is pretty doggone good. Okay? I'm on page 15, by the way, if you guys who have your manuals in front of you. We got a 115-page workbook, folks, for those of you guys who end up purchasing your tickets today. Okay? So, as I said before, context really is everything. There's no such thing as fast or slow. And without context, we really struggle to make decisions. And so what I want to show you here, and one of the ways that we can help our customers and our clients create context is through what's called framing. Okay? Oh, hang on. And here's a couple of different types of frames. I'm now on your page 16. So we have value frames, auditory frames, positive and negative frames, and then what's called forced choice. But you take a look on the screen here, here's a value frame. 20% fat or 80% fat-free. Which one do you think sells better? Right? If you're interested in reduced fat, then probably not the best to frame it as 20% fat. Much better to frame it as 80% fat-free. Then you got the one on the right, 20% off or $120 off. Matt and I actually had this conversation before you guys came on when we were running through the slide deck. And he said, man, I would kind of be interested in I would kind of lean towards the 20%. And I said, the reason that we don't use the 20% very often, that we tend to use the dollar value, as long as the dollar value is significant, is the first thing that you do is you move the conversion in your head. So when you say 20% off, what you're forcing your buyers to do is to get out of a system 1 behavior and into a system 2 behavior. $120, I instinctively know what that means to me. Holy smokes, I save $120, right? If I say 20% off, now what do I have to do? I have no context for that. What do I have to go look for? Well, what is the price? Then you got to do the mental calculation in your head to figure out what a 20% savings of whatever the purchase price is. Now we've gotten somebody out of a system 1 activity into a system 2 activity. Where do you think we want our buyers? Where do you think is most advantageous for us as marketers, salespeople, and entrepreneurs to keep our buyers? As much as possible, keep them in system 1. Okay? Any system 2 behavior that you have them do, anything you show them, anything you talk about, is always within the context of validating what they really want to do and subconsciously. Make sense? It's critical you understand this. Okay? Now let's take a look at positive versus negative frames. First one, 90% of patients make a full recovery, or 1 in 10 patients never fully recovers. Okay? It's the same information. Not only does this have a shocking impact on whether or not people choose to get the surgery or not, like it's overwhelming. It's almost a full reversal. If you say 90% of patients make a full recovery, you say, hey, well, there's a 1 in 10 chance you could die, right? You're like, what? 1 in 10 people die? That's like saying 7 out of every 100,000 Italians is a rapist. You're just like, geez, that's a big number. Wow. Right? Not only does it have an effect on patients and whether they choose to get the surgery, it actually has an effect on doctors and whether or not doctors advocate for the surgery. Now, you would think of all people, doctors should not be ones who would be influenced simply by positioning as a positive or negative frame, but they are no better at dealing with the subconscious mind than you or I.
I bet it would affect the way that they perform the surgery.
The way they perform the surgery as well. I haven't seen a study on that. I have seen a study on the recommendations though, but I'll bet you're right. What Matt said was, I'll bet it would affect how they perform the surgery. And I would imagine that's probably true. Price reduced 33% versus 50% more free. That is exactly the same math, folks. Exactly the same math. One of them, the top one, makes you look desperate. Holy smokes. Because what do you say? Oh, 33% off. Oh, must not be able to sell it. You guys ever go to Nordstrom Rack? Every time I walk in there, I believe the clothes are uglier than they probably are because it's the stuff they couldn't sell. This is the stuff they couldn't get out the shelves. It's like, well, why would I want some stuff that nobody else had? Anytime you position from a discount, it comes off as desperate. Versus 55% more free, well, man, not only is it great, we're giving you more of it at no cost. It's a savings to you. Yeah, go ahead.
He said, does that change with the half off or 50% off? Are percentages better the higher they are?
They still have to make the same calculation. I'm not saying don't use 50% off. It would be much better to reframe it some other way. To find a way to position your product like they did here, where it's like 50% more for free. You know, not only, if you're going to do a discount, let me put it to you this way. This is the way I look at this. We do discounting all the time. There's nothing wrong with it. It's something that a lot of companies do in order to bring in extra revenue. But marketing is the science of getting somebody who wouldn't have bought before to pay full price. Okay? Any idiot can bring in extra revenue by offering a discount. Anybody can. What we're talking about here is something much deeper. Is how do we get to the psychological root of decision making, and how do we craft offers, and how do we communicate our value to the prospect in a way that makes them hungry for what we have? And that requires a little more effort and a lot deeper understanding of psychology as a whole. I hope that answers your question. If not, we can get into it later on in the Q&A as well. And then finally, in any deliberation, you can end by saying, hey, look, this is a win-win for both of us. Both of us are going to walk away from this deal with most of what we wanted. Or the negative frame, hey, you're going to lose big on this if you don't take this deal. Which one do you think is more likely to get the deal done? Any negotiator will tell you the first one is what every single negotiator is after. He's after the win-win. So positive and negative frames, huge, huge, huge effect on how we perceive the value of what we've got. Then you've got forced choice. Forced choice is really interesting because I told you before, one of the things we want is we want autonomy. We want the ability to choose. And in the absence of that ability, we at least want to believe that we had a choice. You guys go to the restaurant, still versus sparkling. Now, when I lived in the Midwest and we went to the Cracker Barrel, they never came up to you and asked still or sparkling, okay? So some of you all who are living out there in flyover country, you might be a still or sparkling. What is he talking about? But if you go to a restaurant in Los Angeles and you sit down, even the less nice ones, typically the waiter's going to show up and he's going to say, "Hey, still or sparkling." Now, that looks like you made a choice. Or it looks like, oh yeah, I'm making a decision here about whether. What he's really saying is, you're having water. Which one do you want? You can't very well ask for tap water now, can you? Or it's much more difficult. If he's given you choices, you asking for an alternative is seen as somewhat socially unacceptable. And so we tend to choose either the still or the sparkling. Another example of this is, would you like to pay now? Would you like to pay in full? Or would you like to set up a payment plan? The assumption, of course, is that you are going to pay. The question is how? And here are your options, right? Would you like the full pay or the 3 pay? Well, I'd like a 6 pay, right? Doesn't happen. We do this a lot. Doesn't happen very often. It's like very rarely do we get somebody who says, well, we got 2 options. You got the full pay or you got the 3 pay. Which one would you prefer? And the guy goes, I'd really like to pay over 12 months, right? He chooses one or the other. How about this? Who's getting the dessert menu tonight? Translation, you're having effing dessert. Who's getting the menu, right? This assumptive. We're giving you choice. The choice is which one of you gets the menu, not are you having dessert tonight. See, even if you don't got any money, you're working as a waiter, you employ some of these tactics, I guarantee you, an instant 20% lift in your bill. You can also do another one. There's like Rory Sutherland points out, like wine is one of the big ones. He says, wine is a total racket. He says, you show up at the restaurant and they have a wine list. And they're like, who's getting the wine list? And of course, you look through the wine list and now one guy at the table is trying to decide for everybody. And what's he say? Red or white, right? Which one are we going to have? So nobody ever says, I'm a gin and tonic, as Rory would say. It's really, really fascinating the way we can create a false perception of choice and then offer it to people. Why? Because we don't have exact information. We don't have a relative comparison. Okay? I'm sorry, we don't have absolute judgments about things, right? We believe we're making absolute judgments when really we're making relative comparisons between two things. And one of our responsibilities as entrepreneurs and as salespeople and as marketers is to be very, very good at creating the choices and the comparisons with which our customers and clients choose. Okay? Now, a couple of other things. Any questions so far? We're almost done. And then I'll open it up at the end.
Carol said that they don't ask still or sparkling in Tennessee.
No, I didn't figure they probably would. In Kansas, no one ever asked me. I go to the nicest steakhouse in Kansas City. Nobody was asking me still or sparkling. I go to the McDonald's here in LA, and they're like, still or sparkling? I'll have a glass of water. Still or sparkling? It's crazy.
We got a question here. It
Yeah.
says, how does the preference for positive win-win framing square with the urge to limit Remember to restate it.
Say it again.
How does the preference for positive win-win planning square with the urge to limit downside? So if people want to limit downside,
It's not. It goes to fairness. Okay, it is not necessarily in that case. It's not necessarily a mitigation of downside risk. It has to do more with, hey, I'm not being bullied, right? I have this is a perceived choice that I have, and it's about fairness. As both of us are walking away with something, and so. Not every situation directly ties to just certainty or the minimizing of downside risk. Sometimes it has to do with others. But the primary driver for us is always that mitigation of the downside. Yeah, sorry, his question was, how does the win-win for both of us versus you better take this deal, how does that square with the idea of minimizing downside risk? And you guys heard my response to that. So that's a really good question. And I know I'm sitting in front of you today and talking to you like I know everything that I'm talking about. The truth is that we still know very little about the way the mind works and about choice. And what's interesting is every time we change the specific scenario, we can change the action or the behavior, which makes this an even more interesting and complicated concept to wrap our heads around. And so, although we know very little about the way our minds work and the choices that we make, what we do know is fascinating. What we do know changes literally everything about the decisions that we make and the choices and the actions that we take, okay? Now, in addition to this, we can also change how we perceive something as good or bad simply by changing the name of it. So, for example, how about used versus pre-owned? Okay, one of them, of course, very negative. Nobody wants to have a used car, but pre-owned, nicer. It's completely irrational. Like I said, you're living in a delusion. You make decisions off of for the stupidest of reasons, and then justify them as best you can rationally in the way that you believe is going to be the most plausible to others, and that's going to provide the least downside to you. Okay? Secretary versus executive assistant, right? I was trying to think of one, Matt, I know there's one out here that's just like, he's a trash man. No, he's he's some sort of other specialist. I can't remember what it was. He's a sanitation specialist, yeah.
My mom always said, instead of stay-at-home mom, she always said domestic goddess.
Instead of stay-at-home mom, domestic goddess, yeah. That kind of stuff. So we all have those things, right? Just changing the name of it.
Tony says, my title is business development representative. I'm a cold caller.
Business development representative. Yeah, I cold call people. How about this one? Apple really made this one famous. Aluminum versus aluminium. You notice every time that they do a release and they get the dude who talks about the phone, it's always like the aluminium frame. That's a lot better in our minds than saying, yeah, it's made out of tin. It's an aluminum can surrounding this phone, right? Sometimes just changing the way we say the word can impact whether or not we find it more valuable or less valuable. Dead versus passed on. Anything that sort of eases the tension of the thing. Okay, and what about cheap versus thrifty? Oh, I'm not cheap, I'm thrifty. And then how about this one? Small versus cozy. Anybody here in the real estate business? If you are, you've never sold a small house. You've sold a cozy house, right? That's the way we all think of it. But it's not just, as I said before, one of the things, and just to be serious with you for a minute here, I think that the study of behavioral economics, our understanding of marketing, doesn't just have an impact on our bottom line. It doesn't just have an impact on our client satisfaction, whether or not our customers want to do business with us, whether they become advocates for us or not, but it also has deep-reaching impacts on our society as a whole. And I want to give you two examples of this just using the naming process. For years, kids who grew up in the inner city, who our governments and our school system believed to be at risk of of falling into drugs and violence and gangs, they referred to them as at-risk youth. And I've read more than one book from people who grew up at this time, and they talked about the impact that that had on them. Can you imagine if from a young age, you as a child living in the inner city were constantly referred to as at risk? How does that define who you are and shape who you are as a person? What effect does that have on your value? And what if we just simply changed the name, and instead of calling them at-risk youth, we called them a child of opportunity? And we said to little Timmy, said, look, man, I know you had a little rougher start than most kids, but I want you to know that's not a bad thing. I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. I want you to know that doesn't mean anything. That far from that being a negative, that's going to be a huge benefit to you in your life, because it's going to present you with opportunities that nobody else on earth has, because nobody else has had to struggle like you. Nobody else is as strong as you. Nobody else has been able to weather, no other kids have been able to weather the storm that you have been able to weather, and you're still here. You're not a child at risk. You're a child of opportunity. The way you grew up and the dangers that you had, and the things that you had to come through and overcome are going to present you with opportunities that nobody else has, because nobody else has lived the life that you've lived. Think about how that changes a young boy or a young girl living in an inner city. See, these are not just things that help us sell more stuff at higher prices and reduce increase our client satisfaction and all these things. These are things that can change the world, that can change the lives of kids, of parents. Here's another one. When I was growing up, child from a broken home. Parents divorced and separated. Oh, he's a child from a broken home. He's at risk. Look at the statistics. All the statistics say that kids who grow up in divorced households are exposed to any number of problems that don't exist if a father and a mother are in the home together. Even if that is true, and all of the science says that it is, what benefit is it to a young boy or a young girl to refer to their home as broken? What does that say to that kid as he goes home? He's looking around, he's like, mom's working, I'm happy and they love me, but my home's broken. Call it a 21st century family. My point is education, experience, and our evolution are what guide us. They're what help us shape our reality. And if we're not very careful, the way we frame things, the way we talk about them, the way we educate people and discuss concepts and ideas, the terms that we give to things have massive impact. They can affect your life until the day you die. I was talking to a client last night who has had a real struggle with money because of the way she was brought up to believe about money, what she was taught to think about money. It's affected her whole life. We tell ourselves all kinds of lies because of the education that we received and the experience that we've had. And sometimes all it takes is just a little tweak, just a little change. And it can have long-lasting impacts on our entire society. And so I'm going to screw this up now. I want to show you one more thing. So if we know a little bit about framing, we can also do something called pre-framing. And I'm going to screw this up now because you just saw the slides. But my point is this. I'm going to demonstrate to you as best I can how pre-framing works. So if we want to frame up a concept to, really kind of focus someone's attention and to kind of nudge them one way or the other, we can actually start this process before they actually come to us. So let me give you an example of pre-framing. In just a minute, I'm going to show you a picture. And what I want you to do is I want you to try your best to engage system one of your brain. Try and answer as quickly as you can without thinking, okay? Which one of these lines is longer? How many of you first thought was the top line versus the bottom line? Who haven't seen this before? Obviously, they're both the same size. This is called the Muller-Lyer illusion. The lines themselves are exactly the same length, yet when we look at them, it's hard not to believe that the top line is shorter than the bottom line. And most people, when they look at this image, I think the term I saw was like 65% or something, said that the top line was shorter than the bottom line. So it is not an exact science. The science of behavioral economics is far more like meteorology than it is physics, okay? Works most of the time with most people, or works some of the time with some people. But with pre-framing, what we can do is increase the odds of getting the desired outcome. So in this case, I pre-framed you with a couple of things. The first thing I said was, answer as quickly as you can, meaning shut down system 2 and just react. Engage only system 1. Second thing that I said is don't think about it. And the third thing that I said was, which line is longer, which is what? A presumption that one of the lines is longer than the other, okay? That's what we did with it. And so I set you guys up with 3 different options to try and hopefully persuade you to choose the top over the bottom. And this is in essence what our marketing does. It is a way for us to pre-frame and control someone's thoughts, beliefs, and actions. To, in a sense, control the world around them, the way they perceive their reality, and to help nudge them one direction or the other. And when done well, it creates an incredible amount of power for you and your business, for you and your career in politics, okay? Whatever you choose to do with it. But what I really want you to come away today with is this understanding that marketing doesn't just add value, that marketing literally creates value. That it is not, marketing isn't just the process of going out and showing people the intrinsic value of something. It's not just icing on the cake, it's the cake. It's essential. And in this world, you can really do one of 2 things to make money. You can either figure out what people want and then find a way to get it for them. That's invention, okay? Or you can figure out what it is you have to offer and then find a really creative way to make people want it. And it is my assertion that doing the second is far easier than doing the first. Not only that, but you can grow market share, have very happy clients and customers without ever having to innovate anything. And entrepreneurs and business owners who neglect to focus on the brand and who do not understand how to communicate value to their audience are going to die by the vine. If you ignore these things, you do so at your own peril, okay? Marketing isn't just part of your business, it quite literally is your business, okay? Since what you do and who you are is defined by you and the context with which you talk to your customers and your clients. Marketing is the science of communicating your value to the world. Okay? It is the most important thing that you will ever learn to do. And it doesn't just have impacts on your business, it has impacts on our society as a whole. And over the next couple of days, we are going to be working together to show you how to implement all of this stuff in your business. And as I said, we start tomorrow at 10 o'clock. And now with all of this stuff out of the way, have I done a good job of convincing you guys of the value of the behavior and how our mind works? I told you at the beginning that we're living in a delusion and that all of us are living the same one, which is why this can perpetuate itself. See, if I was the only one living this way, then obviously everybody would look at that and be like, oh, well, he's crazy. But we're all a little crazy. But we're crazy in predictable ways. And what we're going to do over the next 2 days is I'm going to show you exactly how to use the stuff that we talked about today in your business and in your brand to better communicate your value to the world.